Hello, my dear friends, and welcome to Let to Gold. This is the podcast devoted to discussing all things growth and wellness, and we are here at episode 48 of 50 for season 1. This is ending pretty soon. I'm a little bittersweet about that, but I also do want to talk a little bit just about why that is and where things are going from here. If you're somebody who has been listening since the podcast began in 2022, which, wait, is that right? No, the beginning of 2023. That's where we were. It's been almost 2 years of doing this podcast. I have loved every moment of it. I love doing it. I love putting it out, but I got to be so honest. Shit's hitting the fan. My life has been very chaotic in a good way for the most part, but it has been something that I have had to put on the back burner just in terms of other things going on, other priorities. I don't think this comes as a surprise to any of my listeners, but this is not something that I profit from. I don't make any money here. I have another job, and that is teaching high school English. And this year, I don't know that I talked about this, but I took on an extra class at school. One of our other teachers had left, so to try not to rush the hiring process when it's kind of short term, they try to get other teachers to fill in the positions. So I did that, and it's been great, honestly. It hasn't been too much more demanding, but it is still a lot less time that I have during my workday to actually do work. So it has been a lot more pulling in different directions. That's definitely a theme of what my life feels like right now. I just have so many different directions that I'm being pulled in, so many different responsibilities, and it's a different kind of workload than I'm used to. I'm used to having a lot to do always, but this year, particularly this school year, there's just more genres and flavors of things that I have to do. And it's been, not going to lie, pretty hard to deal with. So if you are a regular listener of Lead to Gold, you may have noticed that we are a week late. This is coming out the Monday after it normally would. So I really appreciate your patience, and we are just going to go right along with what we got. So in other news, I just got engaged like a week ago, and that, of course, obviously is yet another thing that has kind of been pulling my attention. And I'm very excited. I'm very happy, very, very happy. But yet again, something else that is kind of giving me reason to pause this for the time being and divulge my attention elsewhere, if you will. So that's kind of where we're at. My attention is needed in other places, and I got to do it. I got to follow the call. We're going to get into a lot of other little nuances of that kind of conversation today. But all of that to say, just for this show, for me personally, there's a lot going on. Most of it is very good, but that is what it is. Sometimes we just got to pivot. Sometimes we got to put things down if we can't give it our full devotion and attention. And right now, that's where I'm at with this. So I hope you understand. And I appreciate, again, your listening. So I'll get into the usual spiel. If you like this show, if you enjoy this episode, if this maybe is one of the first times you've listened and you enjoy it, I would so appreciate if you could leave a review wherever you're listening. That's a really great way to help others find the show who might be interested in it. And another thing you can do on that same line of thinking is, if you have any friends who you think might get something out of what we talk about here, please share it with them. That would mean the world to me also. Aside from that, if you want a little bit more of this kind of content, this wellness, growth, deep sort of conversations, kinds of conversations, I also run a blog under the same name. The link for that is in the show notes if you're interested in checking that out. I do, or I try to. It's been a little shoddy lately, but I try to do a blog post every Monday and a podcast episode every adjacent Monday. So when I am on top of my game, when I can give this my full attention, you are getting something from me every Monday. I just put out something on the blog just a few days ago, not on a Monday because I'm catching up over there as well. But if this is the kind of stuff that you like to read about, listen to, whatever, there's more of it. And I just wanted to make sure that you knew about that. The very last thing I will let you know is if you want to stay up to date on what's going on with me, with the blog, with the podcast, I also have a email newsletter that you can subscribe to. It is very, very low maintenance. I will never spam you. I don't do announcements for every new thing, but it is a monthly little newsletter that comes with an exclusive Spotify playlist for whatever zodiac sign we happen to be in at the time. So if that interests you, you can subscribe to my emails. And those will continue even after the podcast goes on hiatus. So just thought I'd throw that out there. All the links for all the things are in the show notes. And of course, if you don't want to do any of those things, that is totally fine too. I'm just really happy that you're here. And I'm really happy to have somebody to chat about today's topic with, which I'm going to be honest, I was a little bit hesitant to put this out. I don't even know if that's the right word, but I was unsure of how to approach it because I feel like this is something that is talked about a lot, and I don't want to just rehash the same things that everybody else says about this. I want to offer some nuance, some explanation, some other additional things to think about that kind of fit into this sentiment. But this may be a little bit of a heavier conversation. So, as per usual, when we talk about a little bit more deep or sad, whatever things on this podcast, just, mind how you're feeling. If this is not a conversation that serves you right now, then nothing wrong with tuning in 2 more weeks when I am planning to talk about something a lot more lighter, a lot more lightweight. I don't know how to say that, but you get the idea. Today we are talking about the state of the world, to be totally honest with you, the state of the world, but also our relating to it, because there is a lot of fear-mongering going on. There is a lot of intentional disinformation going on out there. We are very, very close to the 2024 presidential election if you live in the United States, and we have some very high stakes to consider. It's a scary time, not to mention the recent hurricanes that have gone on in our country, not to mention the ongoing horrific injustice and genocide going on in other parts of the world, namely Palestine and many others. It's a scary time. It is a scary time to be so exposed and to witness all of the world's pain. Not that we're seeing all of it, but like a lot of it. We're constantly exposed to bad news. We're constantly exposed to sensationalism, to politics, to issues that are important, but at the same time, just even 15 years ago, we were not constantly seeing this. We were not as aware of the world's heartbreak, heartbeat, pain points. We weren't as involved in it, if you will. And again, this is a nuanced conversation because I know that there is the argument that it is important to stay informed. I completely agree. It is so important to stay informed. It is so important to care, to do what we can as humans who care about other humans, to make sure that those around us are treated with fairness and justice. And it is important to reach out to people who are in need. We should be doing that. However, I will argue until the day that I die that the amount of pain that we now witness and are expected, honestly, to witness is not normal. And that's kind of what I want to get to the heart of in today's conversation. And I think the bottom line here is that if you are feeling insanely overwhelmed, if you are feeling constant just pain and anguish and worry, and maybe even tiptoeing a little bit into hopelessness, like the kind of hopelessness where you're like, I can't do anything about this. Like, what is one person going to be able to do to solve any of these issues that I feel like I have a responsibility to solve with whatever privilege you have, with where you live, if you live in a safe area? There's so much pressure put on us with the amount that we are exposed to all of this horrificness. There's a lot of pressure to do something about it, or to feel like you should be doing something about it. Again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't. You should very much at least care. I'll say that much. You should care. But we are, at the end of the day, just one person, and we have our unique set of gifts. We have only what we are able to provide for other people, most likely local to us. In a lot of ways, we can't affect real change way over on the other side of the world unless we are capable of donating. And even then, that's just one small drop in a larger bucket of aid, if you will. The point that I want to get to is it is normal to feel a little bit hopeless, a little bit helpless. Like there is so much going on and I can't do enough to really solve it. It is normal to let that get the best of you at times. It is normal to feel overwhelmed. It is normal to take all of this in and want to just absolutely cry and grieve and lay on the floor and just let it consume you, because it is such a large pain point. And we, at this point in the way that our media works, the way that our culture expects us to stay up to date on everything, we can't really avoid it. We are all being asked to kind of shoulder this burden. And whether or not you are one of those people who looks upon all of these things and can take it with a grain of salt and just like leave it, or you're more along the lines of this person who takes it all in, and then over time you start to realize that you're worried all the time, that you don't feel good in your own body, that you're overwhelmed, that you're stressed, that you're sad, that you're scared. And fear, I think, is the overwhelming emotion that I feel when talking about this. However you interact with this stuff, I do think it is designed to make you upset, which we'll also get into. By the way, I'm going to stop right here for a moment. I didn't take that many notes for today's episode, so if I'm a little bit rambly, I apologize, but I do hope that I'm making sense thus far. This is a big burden to shoulder. This is a lot of weight to carry. It's not all necessarily our weight to carry. And I want to also just say that if you are finding yourself completely overwhelmed, completely in the midst of a grieving process for the way that the world is, that is okay. That is normal. And there is nothing wrong with you. I've probably said this before. In fact, I know I've written it out before, but if that is how you feel right now, you're the sane one. You are the sane one. That's not to shit on anybody who doesn't have as much of a visceral emotional reaction to the things that are going on in our world. But I do think that it is human to care, to see this and to care and to be upset and to let it bother you. I think that is a natural reaction to the things that we're constantly being blasted with on our news feeds and our For You pages. I want us to think about it like this. 50 years ago, your grandparents had access to the news. They had access to the newspaper, more local, most likely, but there definitely was, national news. That was something that there were resources with which to tune in to things going on. But there were not as many outlets for that news. There were very specific networks, very specific people who, I don't want to say controlled what was talked about, but honestly, yeah, they were able to tailor it more to here's what is important, here's what we think the people need to know about first and foremost. There you go. There it is. And over the years, as I've gotten more interested in journalism and the act of delivering news to people, the act of media, honestly, just where it stems from, how it's grown into what it currently is today, I've learned, and maybe this is common knowledge to other people, but it wasn't to me until quite recently, that in this time, 50, however many years ago, there were the big three news stations. It was ABC, CBS, and NBC. These were your standard nighttime news television series that would last for, I don't know, an hour or two, deliver the news that was important about that day. And then, as far as I know, I'm, showing my my age here, but I'm pretty sure the TV would just shut off. It would be that little message of like, do you know where your children are? And then no more TV for the evening. But in 1980, a nice little tiny network called CNN was born. And obviously they kind of ran their thing from 1980, but it wasn't until 1991 that they were covering events as they happened. This was not a super common theme in the news up until that point, but CNN was so dedicated to delivering news to the people as it happened. They wanted to be the first to break the news to people, and CNN essentially created the 24/7 news cycle, which I find really fascinating, but that changed the course of how we consumed news and media for the rest of time. I know that wasn't a super, super long time ago, but nonetheless, that changed the course of how news was delivered. It became a lot more competitive. Other networks wanted to be the first to report on whatever breaking news was happening, whatever situation was going on. And CNN eventually had some pretty serious competition. So that in and of itself kind of launched what we now know as the 24/7 news cycle. The feedback loop, the constant nature of discovery, which in some ways is not a bad thing. It's nice to be able to have access to what's going on in the world as soon as it happens. But this also breeds misinformation, which I have talked about before, but I'll give us another little definition here. Misinformation is something of an accidental, whereas disinformation is purposeful. So I'll break it down a little bit further. Misinformation happens when somebody has made a mistake in reporting. And when newscasters, different stations, different broadcasters are trying to arrive on the scene to get the first word about a situation, obviously the nature is that things are going to change. Let's say, for example, that there is a tragic, fatal event somewhere. The death toll will continue to rise. So a form of misinformation would be immediately reporting that 17 people died. Later on, that news broadcaster would have to correct themselves and say that the death toll has risen to 75 or whatever. So even that, completely harmless, but that is a form of misinformation because some people may not get the update. Some people may spread that misinformation and then numbers get confusing. This is, if you are any way slightly informed about tragic, fatal events happening today in our modern news cycle within the past few weeks, months, whatever, you know that this is a common thing because, for example, nobody knows how many people have actually been killed in Palestine. Now, that leads me into disinformation, which is the intentional withholding of information or the intentional warping of information. And newscasters, depending on their political standing, depending on how they lean, depending on what they want their audience to know, can and do withhold necessary information to turn the story into something that they want. And that happens a lot. Here's where this gets really overwhelming and really tricky and kind of scary, is that with the amount of media outlets that we now have, where we are supposedly getting our news from, there is no way, absolutely no way, to parse through this accurately. I don't care how much fact checking you do. I don't care that you are like the most practical and discerning person trying to research the most accurate information that you can possibly find. There is too much out there to really, at this point, know the truth. Because truth is not singular. Truth can be determined and warped and manipulated, and truth adds into our own personal beliefs. Truth can be interpreted. There is no one singular truth. I mean, I guess there is, but it's impossible for us to get to it with the amount of stories that we hear, with the lack of fact checking, with the lack of honesty. Because again, truth can be warped. This is where the conversation then bleeds into what we currently see and what we are currently exposed to with people who aren't actually news reporters, people who run accounts with very heavy political leanings, people who want to get out a specific message to specifically target and counter somebody on another side, somebody saying something different. The landscape of journalism as we know it is very, very different from how it was 50 years ago. And there are still honest people out there who want to bring a neutral and honest message, but it is very hard to find them. It is very hard to parse through journalism without any sort of political agenda, because as we well know, especially in the United States, really everywhere, but especially in the United States as it stands with the election less than a month away, almost everybody and every news casting has a political leaning and a political agenda. That makes this really difficult. That makes this very charged in an environment where we have very high stakes and we have very, very severe political polarization at this time. And it's a lot. It is overwhelming. It is violent. It is vitriolic. And it makes sense that it hurts us on an emotional level as citizens. I have a quick little story time here, but I'm going to tie this back in because I do think that there is an important point to be made with this. A few months ago, I wanted to do something fun for my dad's birthday, and I invited him to a concert, which is neither here nor there. We had a great time at the show, but he was going to pick me up and drive me to the city so we could go to this. And when he picked me up, we got in his car and he was like, "Oh, I have something for you." And he pulled 2 camouflage MAGA hats out of his backpack. And it was a joke. I received it as a joke. But my response was, "I'll burn that." Or "I'll burn those," or whatever. And he did not take it well. Not at all. So it ended up, unfortunately, being a political argument in the car on this way to this fun thing that was supposed to be a good time. And it left us both like yelling at each other and me trying not to cry in the passenger seat because I just wanted to do something fun with my dad. And we have had many conversations in the past that did not go well, to the point where I had to kind of set a boundary with him and just be like, I don't want to discuss politics with you. I don't. Because it always ends up in both of us fighting and screaming and one or both of us crying. And I just don't want that. I don't want to do that. But the thing is, and this is what got me thinking from that conversation, and I still don't really know how to feel about it because I have a lot of my own personal emotions, I know, getting in the way of thinking through this clearly. But he had said I had said, I started off with, I just want to be able to have a civil conversation about politics with you, but we can't be civil about it. I just want to be able to have a level-headed, neutral, non-emotional conversation with you about our issues, about our nation's issues, about the larger world issues that we are involved in. And he said, I don't think you do. I don't think you do want to have a level-headed conversation because you had such an emotional reaction to the MAGA hats. And that kind of got me thinking. I'm like, maybe I am a little bit in the wrong. Maybe I am a little bit overly emotional right off the bat with something that doesn't really matter. Maybe. But I do think that this is worth bringing up to say that it is understandable that we are in such a tumultuous relationship with, quote unquote, the other side, because our media has built this up to a point where it can't be ignored. And we as citizens have essentially been ushered to one or the other side. We all have our own choices. We all have the things that we believe in, the things that we want to see that our government can provide for us, or that at least they are responsible for providing for us. But the level of political polarization that we are experiencing is not organic. It was built. And it was built by most largely a lot of, I'm using air quotes here, news outlets that we are now exposed to. And I use air quotes because even some of the most popular ones, Fox, for instance, or MSNBC, for instance, have agendas, very obvious, very strong agendas. Yet people do still tune into them because they agree with that political leaning. The way that these quote unquote news outlets further the distaste for the other side is through demonizing differences. So I'm reading this from an article that I will paste in the show notes on facinghistory.org. But when political candidates and the media demonize the opposing political party, they increase the effective polarization and they contribute to the impression that the other group is a threat. I don't think it takes a whole lot of research or a whole lot of close observation to see how this occurs. But if you listen or if you read the language that either of these sides use on these heavily politically leaning news outlets, it is obvious that they are trying to pose the other group as a threat. Any political campaign commercial that you see, especially leading up to the election, it is obvious that they are trying to show that the other group is a threat. The demonization of other groups is one factor that can lead to political violence and the support for authoritarianism. I would also just like to quickly point out that the reason for doing this, the incentive for various media outlets going so far to one side, is because they effectively get more money to do so. There are lobbyists and special interest groups who give them more money to essentially show their side of things, their point of view, to push it further. So it makes sense that people who don't really know any better, and this is not a dig on those people, this is just human ignorance, older people who aren't as media literate, or younger people who have grown up with this their entire life and don't really know how to parse through it, it makes sense that they are attracted to such strong messaging. There's so much at play here. I could get so deep into it, and especially as an English teacher, this is kind of my jam because I love looking at methods of persuasion. And let me just tell you, as I'm sure you already know, the methods of persuasion used for these highly, highly politicized media outlets are very strong. This is a point of somewhat sinister journalism because they know what will get people riled up. They know what will get people angered. They know what will get them more response and therefore more money, because it's all about money. But let's move away from that because I think I've made my point quite clear. This is how the charged messaging happens. This is how we are exposed to so much political vitriol and violence and things that you should care about, things that you are, quote unquote, supposed to be angered about. It's because it is built that way. And I think until we understand that it is built intentionally to make you angry, to make you upset, until we really, really get that and see it for what it is, our attitudes in interacting with it are not going to change. Even then, and I'm saying this because this is something that I literally teach. This is something that I do for a living. Even then, it is still incredibly bothersome. It is still incredibly scary and worrying to see this continue to happen because, at least from my point of view, I know that not everybody knows this. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day how I interact with it and how well I am able to catch on to the fact that, oh, this news outlet is using charged language. They want me to think this way. This is not entirely truthful. They're using disinformation, whatever. No matter how well I can see through that, not everyone can. And that's really where the media literacy conversation comes in, where I'm very passionate about this also, but I won't get into it for today because I've already talked at length about it. Media literacy skills absolutely need to be improved upon in this country, but honestly, everywhere that has access to a 24/7 news cycle. We need to be better at parsing through this stuff. We need more regulations on what is allowed to be sent out to people. Strongly believe in that, but again, I won't get into that for today. That whole spiel covers the why and the how, but now I want to talk about what we can do about it and how we can normalize the ways that we are responding to this epidemic. I think one final thing to really understand and come to terms with, to understand and accept about our relationship to the media is that if we are a person who regularly watches the news, who regularly scrolls through social media, whatever the app is, be it TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, doesn't matter. If we are a person who exposes ourselves to this daily, we are engaging in an addictive behavior. And I don't know you. I'm not going to pretend that I know you or that this is a 100% universal truth because it's not, but I do think it's important to be aware of the dopamine craving that social media gives us. So another kind of just little personal example here. I don't know when exactly that it hit me that I was addicted to social media. I was addicted to phone usage, whatever you want to call it. But this is a really embarrassing thing to admit, but at the time in college when I was starting to pick up on this, I didn't have the willpower to delete any social media accounts. I took the apps off my phone, but I could never consider deleting them completely outright except for Twitter when I knew that I was going to be starting to teach and I just did not want that out there for people to find. Anyway, Instagram, Reddit, all of the things, even Facebook, even though nobody really uses Facebook anymore, who's my age, I couldn't get rid of them. I could get away from them for a few days at a time, but I would always end up re-downloading it and then essentially binging it. That is addictive behavior. And again, I know I'm just speaking for myself, but I know a lot of people who have dealt with the same thing or who have deleted their apps because they could see the problem within themselves. I recognize too that something has got to give here. We are becoming more aware of this, but nothing has really been done about it yet. And I just want us to understand that when we are constantly being asked to check these things, to constantly communicate and interact and engage with our apps, they're designed that way. Just in the same way that political polarization was built, the addictiveness to your phone was also built because that's what gets these apps and these companies more money. That's what gets them more engagement and eventually more money, is your compulsive need to be on them. So it is not your fault, but this was done manipulatively and purposely because we are the product for these companies. When I always remember this quote from The Social Dilemma, and I think this is becoming a more popular quote in general, but when an app is free, or when a service is free, the user is the product. Because our engagement with advertisements, with people who are paying the app to show their things on the app, when we engage with those things, we are getting them ad revenue, which adds up to the dollar bills. All of that to say, we have to recognize that this is done intentionally and that we are addicted. We are addicted. Say it to yourself as much as you need to say it to yourself. We are addicted. There's a reason why this is so hard to get off of. There is a reason why we keep coming back even when it hurts us to continue to see all of this crazy, awful, horrible, violent shit. There's a reason for it. So once we know that, what can we do about it? I think the most obvious thing is to set limits and work toward a goal for yourself. Honestly, I hate to say it like this, but it really is true. In the same way that an addict of a substance would, you have to wean off. You have to allow yourself to detox from like the dopamine binging that we do when we're on social media. It becomes really difficult because we're so accustomed to this sort of online or on-screen life, but it's really challenging to come back into the quote-unquote real world, because I don't want to say things are boring. I don't want to say that it's like not as interesting, but it's just like we kind of have that itch for like, I just want to sit down and relax and scroll, because in the moment it kind of feels relaxing. It feels like you're not doing anything with your time. You're just sitting and like absorbing media. But what we don't realize is that subconsciously and psychologically, we are taking on, like I said earlier, a lot of energy, a lot. Even if the stuff that we are engaging with isn't highly political or isn't highly violent or scary. First off, if your For You pages look anything like mine, yeah, I'm going to say like 80% of the stuff that I just like scroll through on Instagram Reels are Instagram comedians and just like funny dumb shit and dancing. Like there's a lot of that. But every so often you're going to get an ad, or you're going to get a cry for help from Palestine, or a Palestinian family who needs money, or disaster relief in Asheville, whatever it may be. Every so often you're going to get that. If it's something that you engage with, you're going to get something political. You're going to get something related to the upcoming election. It sneaks in, and we don't realize it in the moment because we don't feel anxious right away. But later on, we start to be like, oh shit, I'm still thinking about this thing that I wasn't even aware that I paid attention to. And that's how it continues to creep in. Anyway, being able to set limits with that, being able to keep up with an Instagram timer, for instance, or getting off the app altogether, deleting it from your phone, and intentionally spending more time outdoors, or making more time for a hobby that doesn't involve content creation, things like that, are ways that we can help get ourselves out of the cycle of dopamine hunting, if you will. One actually quite helpful, it's very ironic, but helpful Instagram reel that I saw, just that made me get off the app immediately because I realized how accurate it was somebody saying, you know, you're sitting here scrolling, you're thinking everything sucks, my life sucks, the world sucks, everything's going to hell, society's crumbling, whatever. Maybe you feel that way right now, but you feel that way because you just sat here for an hour constantly being reminded of all of the awful shit going on. So here's what you can do. There are 5 things that you can do to help yourself get out of this feeling. Stand up, stretch, move around. Meditate for a moment, as in like feel your feet on the ground or feel your sit bone on the ground. Feel whatever is touching the ground. Stretch, and then go drink some water. Drink as much water as you can get down right now. Feel it as it goes into your tummy and down, down your body. Feel it as it goes into your system. And then, if you can, step outside. Even just for 5 minutes. Look around. Look at some clouds. Literally go touch grass. I know that that's such a meme, but it's so true. Go touch grass. Go see if you can see any animals. Listen for birds, whatever. Then come back inside, and if you can, make yourself something to eat. Preferably with a little bit of protein, something that's going to give you a little bit of energy, something that's going to give you a little bit of a grounding feeling. Eat something. And then the last thing is to stay off your phone for the next several hours, if you can. If you can't, make it an hour, make it 30 minutes, but don't come back to this stupid app. Don't do it to yourself, because this is the reason you feel like shit. I don't know that that's exactly what she said or what order that the steps were in, but this stuck with me, and I immediately got off and went to bed. I was late at night, so I just immediately was like, all right, I'm done. I'm going to bed. And it was really refreshing, because I talked about this on a blog post recently, but I have been getting more actual online content that is reminding us that this internet content is not that good for us. Being on these social media apps is not very good for us. So being able to remember that there is an actual tangible reason why you feel like shit, and there are also actual tangible things that you can do pretty quickly to feel better. Go do them. Guarantee you're going to come back to this thought and you're going to feel better. So that's a more immediate thing that we can do, that we can think about to kind of reset our nervous system to a degree and go on about our day, go on about our lives, feel a little bit better about the state of the world. Because when you look around, I'm not going to speak for everybody, obviously, because there are lots of places in the world that are not able to do this right now, and that's very real and very valid. But if you are in a safe place, you can go on about your day and realize and feel gratitude for the fact that you are in a safe place. You are okay. And at least in this moment, there is nothing that you need to worry about. There is nothing that you need to do other than recenter yourself. And that is something that I have been trying to come back to, because it's a good reminder. Now, again, with like the fear mongering, I know, because I'm already thinking this, the thought will creep back in for a lot of us that, it's not happening to me right now, but one day it will. Okay, maybe it will. But we truly don't know that. We can't predict the future. We can't predict when that bad thing will come, when the other shoe will drop, when it's going to be our turn to immediately first person deal with something tragic and awful. We don't know. So for the time being, focus on righting yourself, focus on relaxing your own nervous system, focus on resting, focus on finding the joy in life where you can, so that you can be better prepared for when something does happen, or even better, so that you can refuel and use your gifts to help people who are actively, presently, currently in need. There is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with you. There is a lot wrong with the way that our political and media systems are working right now. There are a lot of regulations that need to be made. There are a lot of changes that need to be discussed and worked through. But I promise you, if you feel crazy, if you feel depressed, if you feel hopeless, that is not your fault. If you feel like you're not doing enough, that is not your fault. These systems are built to make you feel that way so that you keep engaging, so that you keep regurgitating all of the nasty feelings and they stay with you because, again, that's what addiction does. But there are things we can do to get out of that cycle. And I really do think that as individuals, this is the work that really matters right now is first, breaking the tie, being able to see things for what they are, not perfectly, but at least being able to recognize this was made to make me upset. This was made to make me angry, to make me scared. Being able to notice that and be present with it, which is a lot easier said than done. But that's the first thing that will help us to kind of recognize the illusion and break the cycle. The second thing, and this is longer term, is being able to take our concerns and take our fears away from the internet, away from the echo chamber and the constant virtue signaling. And I'm not saying that this is what you are doing by posting about issues that matter, but to a degree, just the posting is not going to do anything for you, nor is it going to do anything for the person or people that you are trying to help by spreading the awareness. Spreading the awareness is fine, but it is just the first step in a much longer and more intensive process. So once we are more aware of what media is intentionally doing to us and our psyches, the better way to cope and to actually act on the things that we want to act on, the bigger issues, the scary things that we encounter, is to get off the internet with it and go have real conversations with people. Discourse does not happen very well online because it immediately gets polarized. It immediately gets thrown into a space where there could be bots, where there could be people who just want to troll you. It's not conducive to good conversation. But out in the real world, with people that you know, people that you can be with face to face, town hall meetings that you can go to, local elections that you can partake in, that's where actual change happens. That's where actual important discussions happen. And when we have the strength to bring ourselves into those spaces, that's where we can affect real change. And I promise you, when you can get yourself into a space and involved in a real-time, in-person conversation, I don't even mean in person like you have to be physically with that person. I'm talking like you can attend town hall meetings and conferences that you care about online. You can listen in. That's where this stuff matters. That's where this can actually affect change. So please know that interacting online is not the only way to interact. Know that it is not by any means the best way to interact. It is not helpful. It's not conducive. In fact, it's probably just hurting you as an individual more than it's helping anyone else that you're thinking you're helping. Online discourse is not the same thing as actual action. So just something to consider. But that is definitely a goal of mine as I'm entering into this timeline of taking a break here on the podcast. Also taking a break from constant content creating, because as I'm getting more into this conversation and understanding the detrimental effects of being chronically online as I am, I'm realizing that I don't always have the discipline to go onto my Instagram, make the content, post the video, and get off. I don't. I spend too much time on it. I spend too much time absorbing the shit that's making me feel worse. And at least for now, I think my best course of action would be to step away from that, figure out how I can better interact with it, and come back when I'm ready. But right now is not that time for me. So with that said, we're closing down. We're packing up for the winter. And I'm actually really excited about that process. This is not just a personal thing, but also potentially something that you could consider for your own life. Not only if you're on the northern hemisphere side of the world, not only are we entering into the slower season of fall and winter, which is a natural time to slow down, kind of purge the things that we no longer need. I talked about this in a blog post recently, I think, but fall always feels like a really opportune time, not to necessarily do spring cleaning, but to just like get rid of actual items that I don't need anymore. Like I'm very much on my free and trade Facebook group, like the local free stuff Facebook group. I don't know what to call it, but I'm getting rid of stuff. I'm packing up my garden for the winter. I'm starting to like put my garden beds to bed, planning, what I'm going to be growing next year, but just kind of like cleaning and tidying and getting things ready for the winter hibernation, if you will. And it feels really good. And at the same time, this is me getting on my Astro House shit for just a second, but if you weren't aware, the Pluto retrograde is ending soon. Actually, no, it already ended. Pluto is direct again, and its time in Capricorn is ending. I've talked about this on a blog post too, but Pluto's changes in signs are really, really significant of endings. Because Pluto has been hanging out in the last few degrees of Capricorn for like several months now, that signifies that we are about to exit a very status quo generation. We are about to exit a very strict, very firm, very Capricorn-esque time in our larger world landscape. And it's entering into Aquarius, which is almost the exact opposite. Aquarius signifies the collective. It signifies out-of-the-box thinking. It signifies rebellion to an extent, creativity, dreaminess, and it's going to feel very different. Now, you can think whatever you want to think about astrology, no judgment. I just find it a really interesting observation that in a time right now where it feels like we are on the precipice of something really big and really important, there's a lot of endings going on personally and in the larger scheme of things. There's a lot of really sort of dire circumstances, things that need to be attended to now. I find it very interesting that the Pluto switching over into Aquarius for good coincides with that. And the last thing I'll say about that is that it will be in Aquarius for roughly the next 20 years. So that is effectively bringing us into a new generation, a new era, if you will. So it's kind of exciting. It's kind of cool. I just find it interesting. Again, if you're not an astrology person, you don't have to be. It's just something that I noticed that is kind of adding to this signaling of things changing and ending. And it's kind of cool in a way. So that's the conversation for today. I hope that didn't go in way too many directions or get too depressing or too in the weeds, but regardless, if you have stuck it out this long, I really appreciate you being here. I do think that this is an important conversation. Media literacy in general is something that I am really finding myself so passionate about that I'm wanting to do more with it. I'm wanting to bring it into the educational realm of my life as a teacher in a more meaningful, more concrete way. And I hope to really affect some change there in the educational landscape, but that is a longer term project that hopefully we'll get into. And surely as it goes, I'll update you. But let's end today's episode on a slightly lighter note. Let's get into our healing question from We're Not Really Strangers, which is, if you don't know, a little card game where we just pull cards, ask questions. And if you want to grab a journal or write along, think along to this question, I encourage you to do so. But let's go ahead and pick a card and chat about it, shall we? Okay. As I say a lot of times on this show too, sometimes the questions are just a little bit too spot on. So this is one of those. What's been causing you unnecessary stress? What would help alleviate that for you? Okay, so my first and most obvious answer, I think, is everything that we just discussed. So I'm not really going to rehash that, but obviously the unnecessary amount of time that we spend / I spend on social media is certainly not helping me. And it's probably not helping you either, but we just talked about all that. So the other thing that I'm going to say is something that I am noticing within myself, and I do think a lot of this stems from my OCD, but I am a very strong to-do list person. I have a lot of, staying on the astrology side of things, I have a lot of placements in Virgo. My rising is Virgo. My Mercury is Virgo. No, it's not. Venus is Virgo. Anyway, I am a very to-do list person. I am a very check it off person. I thrive with a to-do list. I love having it. I love checking things off. The satisfaction is unmatched. However, the downside to being that way and the downside to getting into the habit of like chronically looking at my to-do list is that I am chronically adding things to it, and I am chronically giving myself too many things to eventually check off. I also, at the top of my to-do list, mark it by the day. So it looks like, when you look at it, to do October 15th, for example. So all of the 7 or 8 things that are on my to-do list, as it's worded, I should be getting done on October 15th, which is not very conducive to feeling good about things, because obviously I am not going to get all of those things done in that day. I'm just not. To-do lists are great. I love them. I'm never going to stop using my to-do list, but I do think that if I could rework it in a way that is a little bit more conducive to like giving myself time, giving myself space and breathing room, that would be helpful. That would be alleviating a lot of current stress that I feel. Because there's a lot that I have to do. There's a lot that I need to do. And putting it all on one day is a recipe for disaster, as I'm sure many of us know. But it's just a habit that I've gotten myself into that's been harder than I realized to kind of like get out of. Also, until talking about it right now on the podcast, I haven't really thought of it too much as a conscious issue. So now that I'm saying it out loud, it's reminding me, oh, maybe I should rework how I do that. So what about you? What's been causing you unnecessary stress, and what are some things you can do to help alleviate that stress? I hope that whatever it is, it's not causing you too much grief, but I also hope that you are able to come up with solutions. If you want to share your thoughts about that question or about anything we discussed today, as per usual, you can always reach out to me on Instagram. You can send me an email. I love hearing from you all more than anything. So even though the podcast is coming to an end soon, or a hiatus, I still want to hear from you anytime, whatever. Let me know. Let's talk about it over there as I try to brush up my relationship to Instagram and the rest of social media. That's that. So thank you so much for being here on this very charged and very deep and stressy conversation. I hope that this was somewhat helpful. I hope that this was maybe a little bit cathartic, maybe affirming, and either way, I just really appreciate you listening. So we'll talk again in 2 weeks. Actually, scratch that. Since I'm late this week, I am planning to do another one literally next Monday. So it's coming out pretty soon, and that'll get us all set up for the end of the Led to Gold Season 1. Next episode is going to be a lot lighter. I have some really fun plans in mind, something a little bit different than what we would normally do here. So hope you tune in. And in the meantime, treat yourselves well. Take care of yourself. Take care of the people around you. Tell people you love them. And I love you. I really, really do. We'll talk soon. Bye.